shores of Nova Scotia, to the rocks of Newfoundland, to the streets of Quebec City, I'll be your wandering man. From the Gulf Stream of St. Lawrence out to the prairie song, up in the Rocky Mountains, I'll be wandering on. I'm wandering on. I'm wandering on. Singing your song. I'm wandering on.
I'm traveling north from Hat Creek Ranch on the old Caribou Wagon Road to north central British Columbia. Back in 1865, Barkerville was the biggest city west of Chicago and north of San Francisco. It was named after an Irish miner by the name of Billy Barker. Billy had a dream. The number 52 came into his mind. He went to the gravel above Williams Creek and he dug a shaft down to 52 feet. And there he found gold. Barkerville became the wildest town in Canada. I wonder how wild it is today.
Waking up in my room at the St. George's Hotel, it was as though I had gone back in time to 1860s Barkerville. Through my open window drifted the sounds of a mining town slowly coming to life. The creak of wagon wheels, the clank of the blacksmith's hammer, and the chatter of the mountain squirrels evoked the memory of a simpler time in a long-ago place. And off in the distance, I could hear the sound of miners hard at work.
Now repeat after me. I solemnly swear.
I solemnly swear.
Any gold found in today's cleanup.
Any gold found in today's cleanup
Is the sole property of the sheepskin mine.
is the sole property of the sheepskin mine.
And I won't issue no knowledge of it to no one.
And I won't issue no.
My name's David Radford. I play a part here at Sheepskin Mine, and my character's name is William Coots. And I'm the Sheepskin Mine owner. The character that I play has inherited the Sheepskin Mining Company from his uncle. He gets up here, and there's no money to be made with it. There's nothing. William Coots Jr., or myself, comes up with a plan in order to try and get people to invest in this mining company, $6,000. Of course, it's a bit of trickery. I'm trying to get people to give me $6,000, but in actual fact, I'm going to take that money and probably run away. The character I'm playing is a mine owner. Now, it's not going to be as apparent as, say, people here in Barkerville that are miners. Miners are more of what people are looking for. People wearing gumboots down that mine shaft, wet, cold. A character of a mine owner, you're not going to see that often, but hopefully you get it through the show that the mine owner is somebody who hires these miners, they come work here, and hopefully we show a bit of a profit. So.
Mark Dawson.
Mark Dawson, and the character you're playing?
Is Casper.
And your job here at Barkerville?
My job here at Barkerville is just basically to help Mr. Coots run the wheel and show people a pretty good time. Casper Moss is one of the people who've come over basically to this gold rush in the hopes of making it rich. And for a lot of the people, for instance, coming from England, they were trying to escape a class system that they couldn't get out of. So they'd come over here and take a big gamble, because in that way, if you manage to make it, get rich, then it was your only chance to break through that class system and possibly make something of yourself. What would happen too is the miners would come up, they'd have their own claim. It might not be working out so well for them, so they'd wind up working down in the mines in order to help finance their own claims so that hopefully they could also recover some gold.
The life of a caribou miner was hard and dangerous, but filled with rewards that few of these men would have traded for all of the gold in these mountains.
Well, unfortunately, it's not so much the money that draws me here, but I've been up here for 6 years at least. But it's more taking in the wildlife in the area. There's some really great hikes. There's some awesome canoeing over at Bowen Lakes. There's a lot of things to do in your off time. We have a lot of events to go on as well, so it's a pretty good summer. For me, it's like a summer vacation.
But I'm really loving it up here. I've never been this far up into British Columbia before. I've been back and forth to Vancouver and Victoria many times, but I've never been up here, so it's just absolutely incredible. So coming up here and actually coming to Barkerville and understanding it is a real eye-opener for me.
What does Barkerville mean to me? Well, I guess Barkerville is where the gold rush started, and it's also really where British Columbia got its start. I mean, if it wasn't for the gold up here in the Cariboo, British Columbia might not have become a part of the Dominion of Canada.
Important to Canada, for sure, and especially for people like myself who've never heard of it. And hopefully more and more people will hear about it and come up here, because it really is incredible. I mean, being one of the first, well, the first city really up here, just phenomenal, really.
A significant part of the Barkerville story is the one played out by the Chinese miners whose contributions, up until recently, have been overlooked.
And so the Chinese government put a ban on opium and punished anyone who was seen smoking it, or in possession of it, or selling it. But the British did not like this at all, because that would mean that their trading would stop, and so the Opium Wars began.
When Britain took away Hong Kong and other port cities, because Hong Kong is located in Guangdong, on the coast,
What
southeast.
year was that?
This was in 1897 when Hong Kong was given away to Britain. That allowed people to leave the country so they could come here for the gold rush. Thousands of them came because China was at this time, in the late 1800s, going through many problems. There was no jobs available, and so what the families would do at first was, send their sons out to big cities like Hong Kong and try to find jobs in factories and whatnot. But when they heard about the gold in Canada, all of them rushed across the ocean. They called Canada Gamsan, which means Gold Mountain. The Chinese people in China, they actually mine copper, and copper is a lot lighter than gold. And so they were already experts at the panning technique. And so when they came here, they would just find gold where European miners would have left behind.
Now, this building here is a Chinese laundry. It was very common for Chinese people to have laundry businesses at this time, because it was a substantial income at the low risk. The Chinese people like to keep a low profile, especially in this strange and foreign land.
I mean, it was tough for everyone who came all the way from Europe or wherever, halfway around the world to Cariboo, where it was completely different. And it was especially tough for Chinese people because they got paid less, because they had to pay more for whatever they wanted to buy, because of the racial tensions that existed. It was especially tough for them. Chinese head tax was something that all Chinese people had to pay before they could immigrate to Canada. In 1885 is when the head tax first came to be. They had to pay $50. And then in 1901, it was raised to $100. In 1903, it was $500. And then finally, on July 1st, 1923, the Canadian government passed the Exclusion Act, which stated that no one of Chinese descent was allowed to immigrate to Canada, simply because they were different. Chinese people were different, and the European people felt threatened by them, maybe, because there were so many of them. I mean, the Chinese people made up half of the population of Barkerville at the height of the gold rush. And the reason why they hired Chinese people was because they were cheaper labor. You could hire them you could pay $2 a day, as opposed to European workers who got paid $4 a day. The main reason for the men to come here was to send money back home to their families. That was their main goal. Some of them intended to raise and grow their families here in British Columbia, but the majority of them came here so they could make money to send money back home, because in China, they were making the equivalent of $2 Canadian a year, whereas here in Canada, they could make $2 a day. The act was finally repealed in 1947 after hundreds of Chinese Canadian men fought for Canada in the Second World War. They came back home and they demanded their rights, and that's when it was finally repealed.
When you wander the streets of Barkerville, you cannot help feeling haunted by the whispers of ghosts who want their stories told. For storyteller Ann Walsh, it has been a passion to bring their stories to life.
I've been an author 20 years this fall. There's something about that town. First time I went there, it was with two kids, my husband's nephews, and the road wasn't finished. It was in the 60s. And when we got to Barkerville, it was getting dusk, and they were just closing everything. There was only one restaurant, the Wake Up Jiggs. And then we went out onto Barkerville streets, and there was no one else there. And the air had that sort of thick dust quality, and there was no one else on the streets. And we walked the streets and looked in the windows at the displays, and it was just, there was something there. And I knew, it was as if the ghosts, the old times, were jealous of the new times, and they were just waiting for us to clear out of there. And as soon as the last tourists left and they shut the Wake Up Jake, then they'd come back and start living again their lives. It was eerie. I get shivers up and down my spine when I think about it. Oh, what attracted me to it? Well, the gold. What else? This is the caribou. The gold rush is so much a part of everything that happens. Every town, the names, the street names, they're pioneers, they're miners. And the main thing was that I'd been a teacher for many years, and kids need to read history that's their history. And all they were getting 20 years ago was history from the States, the Civil War, and I thought, well, it'd be really nice to take this area and put the magic of Barkerville, of the Caribou Gold Rush, into books for kids. Moses, Me and Murder is the one that's perhaps the lowest reading level, and it's based on the murder of Charles Blessing along the Caribou Road in 1866. There are many, many stories in Barkerville. I wrote a time travel story set in Barkerville because Barkerville itself had that magical quality, and I knew that the past and the present overlapped so much that I could feel it. What's the future of Barkerville? It needs to survive. It's not just a tourist attraction. There are thousands of artifacts there from Moses' journal. Everything he ever wrote in that journal is there in the archives, to photographs, to things donated from people whose grandparents were in the gold rush and have donated them. I think Barkerville needs to survive. I hope the federal and provincial governments can pull together and keep that piece of heritage, not just for our generation, but for generations yet to come. It's something Canada needs.
One of Barkerville's most famous characters is the man known as the Hanging Judge, Matthew Bailey Begbie. I was called to his court for a trial that I hoped would not end with my own hanging.
Oyez, oyez, oyez! This court is now in session in this judicial district of Caribou. Draw near, give your attendance, and you shall be heard. God save the Queen. Perhaps we should try that again, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, for me, it's always a privilege to work as an actor. And as such, yeah, I always leap at the opportunity whenever it comes up. Certainly this one is a very interesting job. There's a great sense of obligation both to be as historically accurate as possible, but also I feel the burden of many other Begbies who've come before me who've possibly done really fantastic jobs, so there is that sort of sense to grow into the authority of the role. But I think what we learn from history is really the reflection of ourselves through that particular lens, whatever it's an 18th century lens, a 17th century lens. And I think what it does, at least for me, and why I find it fascinating, is that the human brain is essentially the same as it's always been. People have always the same needs and desires and wants, and to see those play out in different eras and with different values and different social structure, different moral structure, and yet discover how utterly the same we all are, for me is absolutely compelling and fascinating. Barkerville is vital though, because I think it absolutely creates a more concrete impression for kids in particular, but for anyone, about the significance of, you know, the sacrifices that men made in order to build these early settlements and the significant contribution they made to the history of the province.
Grateful to escape Begbie's noose, I was reminded of the importance of a good education by the ringing school bell. I ran all the way to the schoolhouse, not wanting to be late for class.
I do expect you all to be on your best behavior. Very good. You can go in now. You are late, young man, and I do not tolerate tardiness. I am surprised at the older student. Remove your hat. And I did ask you to tend to that haircut with Master Moses. My goodness, I'm surprised at the older students. My character's name is Mrs. Thompson, and she was a widow who came up to teach school in Barkerville and was one of the longest running school teachers. The 71 years we had a schoolhouse here in Barkerville. I love it. I do believe if you're going to be a heritage interpreter, there has to be a certain love for the area. I was born and raised in this area and baptized in St. Saviour's Church. So I do know a lot of the area. I do not know everything, of course, no one does. However, I do love the area, and I love working with the people, especially the children. You know, I get to carry a stick and pretend to be mean, at the same time make them laugh. And they do learn stuff in my classroom, actually. You know, I teach them what dunce means, and I teach them how to sit straight, and I do teach penmanship, which is a lost art in our schools nowadays. I only see it getting better, as I know that the funding issue is still around. However, there's a lot of people in this world, and especially locally, a lot of people in British Columbia that love Barkerville. And we've had such support from the people in general that I think the people are binding together right now and saying, no, this is our heritage. We need this. The history here this is the largest museum I've ever seen in my life. And it's very lovely here. It's a great place for students from all ages. You know, it's because of the laughter, I do believe, that I get from the students. And when you see the realization that they actually learn something from your classroom. The lessons are only 30 minutes long, so you have a lot to fit in that 30 minutes. And I love being in Barkerville. I love this area. This is where I was born and raised. And I think it's great when other people find that same enthusiasm and they leave here with big smiles on their faces.
I couldn't leave Barkerville without taking one last stagecoach ride with my good friend Jiggs, a man whose gold is in his heart and not in his hand.
Well, I came here a year ago to find some maps. The town just got a hold of me, and I just have to come back here and stay here. I felt like I was here 130 years ago. You know, it just does that to you. I worked for major oil companies, trained and broke and sold horses as a hobby. Got tired of the high-tech stress and come to Barkerville. Regular day for me is get out to the barns 5 o'clock, feed my horses, go feed myself, come back, groom, harness horses, start hauling people and mail and freight in town till 6 o'clock at night. Well, I kind of think maybe I was born 150 years too late. I just love doing it. Dealing with horses and this type of era and dressing up in the style of people, and kind of wished I would have been here 150 years ago. Well, I don't know what the future of Barkerville will be, but I hope it turns out to be like it was 150 years ago and stays that way for another 150 years. I'd like to try and help make that happen. To just slow down your life pace and come to Barkerville, and it might just do your soul very well.
Bring the mail up from Yale to the Goldfields. Bring the judge, bring the fancy lady too. You're the Concord stage, Barnard bought in Frisco. how I'd like to take this ride with you. Well, you met the mighty steamboats on the Fraser. You were there to greet the flying CPR. Steve Tingley was the finest of your drivers. Today he'd be a Western movie star, and it's the last Stagecoach ride. It's our wild Western pride, and we're all traveling side by side. We're on the last Stagecoach ride. There's a gambler, there's a rambler, there's a miner, a dance hall girl, a preacher, and a fool. They're all rocking to and fro to the rhythm of a stagecoach heading for the Caribou. They're on the last Stagecoach ride. It's their wild Western pride, and they're traveling side by side. They're on the last Stagecoach ride. We're on the last Stagecoach ride. We're on the last Stagecoach ride.
As night fell in Barkerville, I stood on the boardwalk and watched the light of a kerosene lantern through the hotel window. A million stars filled the sky, and the shadows of the forest folded like a blanket around the old ghost town. I could hear the ghosts begin to whisper their stories, and I wanted to listen to them all. But then I heard a new song in the wind, and I knew it was time to wander on.